Kendall White, and I am so pleased to moderate this panel of amazing people today, and know that it will be beneficial for those people that are certified, are interested in certification, or should be interested in certification. I am the owner of Berkshire Group and also on the national board, currently serving on the National Board of Directors. So you will see their bios in the information, but I'd like to say at least a sentence about each person that I have with me today. So I'm going to start with Liz. This is Liz Whitehead, and Liz is an optimist and change maker who believes in and works for economic independence for underestimated entrepreneurs. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. Thanks, Janet.
And hi, good to be with you. Shaquanta Locke, she is a patient advocate known for her quiet strength and steady presence. She has family at the center of who she is and deeply values the freedom for each person to show up as their true self, unapologetically and authentically. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Ade Toleru is a builder who transforms complexity into clarity and ideas into impact. And I love all of your statements. So welcome. I'm excited for this panel. My first question, I'm going to start with, I think what is more, maybe broader, and then we're going to get into a little bit more nitty gritty about business owners. So I'm starting with Liz in terms of NAWBO certification. So there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of fear going on right now. What's the value currently of NAWBO certification? And then I'm going to ask Shaquanta and Ade if you want to add to that.
Sure. So I think the fear is that in a current environment, that not only are there, programs and things that are being dismantled, but that it's actually a disadvantage to signal yourself out as a woman-owned business. I've heard people say, do I have to take that off my website? So we're not only, I'm not going to be able to take advantage of these programs that I've had before, but also, is this going to hurt me in getting business with other companies? I think that's one of the biggest fears out there. In terms of the value,
Yeah.
I would say that the value for business owners, it's always good to be in community. I would say that's the number one thing, especially when things are scary. And NAWBO is a community of women business owners, and the certification is another way for you to be in community with the people, like the people on this call today, that continue to support women business owners. It helps you signal out who does care about this, who had a real program to begin with, and how can I be in community with them.
Awesome. Ade or Shaquanta, would you like to add?
Shaquanta, go ahead, please.
Well, I think I speak to it from I guess, a program manager perspective. And when I think about the fear piece of it, I think that on my side, I sometimes wonder about the ROI. Like, how am I going to continue to explain it? And how am I going to continue to make sure that everybody on this side is hearing and noticing? I guess the real benefit of taking on some of these women-owned businesses into our supply chain. But I agree,
Awesome.
Community is definitely important, even in my world, because people like me are asking the same questions.
Absolutely. Awesome. I have a bit of a contrarian view, but it does concur with the thoughts expressed here. I think a little bit of fear is healthy because it forces you to take stock and evaluate and say, am I doing all the right things? Am I positioning myself well as a business? And am I creating value for the people that I want to see value in me? And I think as it relates to NAWBO and as it relates to the women-owned businesses that are certified under NAWBO, they're all very serious people. I've met a lot of WBEs, and none of them are unserious people, and none of them are unfocused people. And the fact that they do belong to a community of other serious, focused people actually speaks to really ultimately long-term value of the certification. That says, I can commune with other serious people and we can think about how to create value, because value will always be appreciated by the buyers who are the prospective customers. The Shaquantas of the world actually appreciate seriousness of purpose, focus, readiness, all of those things. And the things that generate fear are when if you're unsure of yourself, if you don't know if you actually produce value. So, even though this is kind of a weird time to be in, I see resources like NAWBO to be real accelerators for the serious folks who are trying to get ahead in spite of anything that's going on in the world today.
I love the way you characterized us. Uh, so, I opened the door, so I'm just going to go there. I was going to ask this question a little bit later, but the fear has, come up, and I started by just mentioning the word. So let's go there for a few minutes. What are the fears that you're hearing? Let's name them. Let's get them on the table, starting with whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I can start with this one because I think I sort of went with it a little bit. I mean, I think one of them is one, it's a disadvantage to be a woman-owned business. I think two, the dismantling of of programs that have been helpful to business owners has happened in some places. And then finally, I think people are afraid of losing contracts. I mean, I'm in the DC area and people did lose contracts. It's not just a fear, it was a reality that people with certain words in their contracts lost them. Some of them got them back. But for a business owner, this like the lack of stability is very it really pulls the rug out from under you. So I think even just the uncertainty of I don't know. Like I used to know what the NAWBO certification meant. I used to know that exactly as Ade said, it put me in this caliber of women business owners that were serious about growing and scaling through larger contracts. And now I don't know what that means, what that signals.
Awesome. Ade or Shaquante?
Want to go a day?
Sure. The fears that we're hearing, to echo what Liz just said, is about not knowing what the rules are now, because we became accustomed to a certain framework as to how we operated and what people valued and what advocacy was taking place, and the rug has been pulled out from under everybody's feet. And that's not to say that women-owned businesses are just women-owned businesses, but it's to say those were the rules, and we don't quite know what the new rules are. So if somebody could just kind of make it clear, but a perversion of the rules where sometimes it starts to feel sometimes like a disadvantage. That's kind of reflecting on the fear thing. But there are companies that we encounter who say, is it actually a disadvantage to differentiate as a WBE now? And that's going a little bit to the point of, wait a minute, I never thought it would actually possibly come to that if in people's mindset.
Mm.
So it is, I think, just that uncertainty of not knowing how are we to proceed from this point forward, because we're all creatures of knowing where the boundaries are and what the frameworks are. And right now, it seems like there's a little bit of difficulty figuring out what that is, and we see that expressed a lot.
Thank you.
And I guess I'll chime in. I think from my perspective, it's also a fear of maybe unemployment, because there have been lots of people in my space that are now unemployed, or maybe they've been moved to other roles and things like that because some companies have decided, okay, well, we need to step away from these programs.
Right.
So it's definitely a real thing from a program manager, point of view.
Yeah.
Like, who wants to, put in all of their time and focus on this only to find out that later maybe it's not as important to some people, and then their job goes away. So it's concerning.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. And Day, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
How can we look at supplier diversity and procurement from the quote other side?
The other side. I used to be on the other side, the dark side, in procurement. And when we talk about supplier diversity, or really, supply inclusion and resilience, we usually focus on what buyers need to do differently. But I think there's another side, and that's how can suppliers position themselves to meet those expectations. Procurement today is fundamentally about risk management and readiness. That's what my job was many, many eons ago was protect the organization, manage our risk, manage our exposure, manage our supplier relationships, and make sure that you are sourcing and identifying suppliers who are ready. And so I think in the 50, 60, 70 years of organized procurement, buyers are still looking for partners that are compliant, verifiable, financially sound, ready to transact quickly. Those serious women-owned businesses that I was referring to earlier are exactly that. So the opportunity is not just to be seen. That's not all that NAWBO represents, for example, but NAWBO is helping organizations to be ready when that visibility turns into demand. When the buyer says, okay, I know what I need. I know what kind of organization, what kind of capability I seek, and I need to figure out who's out there and able to respond, especially when there are stresses in the supply chain, when there are disruptions that we don't anticipate. We all went through that a number of years ago when we discovered exactly how disrupted a supply chain can be, and readiness was everything. And as we go into more and more uncertainty in the marketplace, I think that idea of readiness and that idea of having business-ready companies that are able to satisfy requirements and can be agile, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's really where the other side is now focused. That's where the other side is investing their time, and that's where they're training their lens to say, I'm looking for people who can be this. And unfortunately, you don't get a big procurement forecast for this. It's, I need somebody now who can satisfy this requirement. And I think as long as women-owned businesses are prepared and ready and represent the least amount of risk and represent the highest likelihood of success, they will continue to be successful no matter what happens with policies or priorities in the marketplace.
Awesome, thank you. Shaquante, you want to add to that?
Sure. So I think when I'm considering, the other side of things, I'm thinking about the other side of all of this change, right? So what does it look like going forward? And I think that everybody has learned to pivot. And I think that we can take all of these lessons that we've learned so far and lessons that maybe are kind of happening with other organizations or, things like that, and take that and use that level of change to make some steps, going forward. Maybe you start looking at different industries, maybe you were into the government contracts. Well, maybe now I need to look at the private sector. You know what I mean? So, maybe that's something that has a space for you now, and you need to find a way to position yourself to move into those spaces. So I'm trying to think on the bright side, take this and use it to your advantage and figure out a way to get your foot in another door.
Great segue into my next question, starting with you, Shaquante, and that is, what's been put in place to replace what's been removed?
I will say what I've noticed so far is a change in language, so maybe some people are not saying that we're, counting spend. We're looking at, I don't know, behaviors, things of that nature, how many opportunities are these companies getting, things like that. But then also you have people saying, okay, well, now we're not going to focus on a diverse business. We're going to look at small business. That's been one of the larger things that I've seen, because it's all still the same, it kind of goes back to the previous question, like these are changes that we've experienced and they're not a bad thing. It's just saying, okay, well, you say small, I say small as well. And so let me just figure out how to make it work. So I've noticed more language changes and ways to report and maybe position yourself as being different now. We're looking at more economic impact. And again, it's not a bad thing. We need to see, the work that we're doing and how it's impacting the people around us in the different regions where maybe we have facilities and things like that.
Yep. Thank you. Anybody want to add?
I know we've seen, we're a purveyor of tools, and for a long time, some of what our clients measured was spend. How much have you spent with women? How much have you spent with minorities? And weirdly, that's not always accessible because people can't necessarily connect, especially if it's a different demographic group than you're in, and so on and so forth. But some of this shift. How much have you spent with small businesses? Small businesses represent something like 90-something% of the businesses in this country, employ more than half the people in this country. And so people can connect to small. People are talking about local now, and everybody's local somewhere. And so
Mm,
you can cleave on to the localness of things. And so now the conversations and even what our tools do are we express progress in terms of economic impact, in terms of jobs supported, in terms of GDP growth, in terms of how much of the tax base is being derived from the activity of this organization. So um, women-owned businesses, small businesses, diverse businesses have always been part of the equation. And now perhaps some of this change is kind of forcing the narrative to shift a little bit into more accessible language to say, oh, I understand local. I can get behind that. Where before it felt like someone else, some other group, some population that I'm not part of. But now I think there's a realization that no, the WBEs that you used to hear about, they are also the small local businesses that keep the economy of wherever you live going. So you should actually care. But now maybe we're
mhm.
expressing it a little bit differently than we were before.
Yeah. I
Interesting.
want to piggyback on that because I was on a call earlier this week where someone said, it's a good thing we all know what we're talking about because if somebody else came here to listen to us, they'd think we were from another planet. Like WB, MBE,
Right.
NMSDC, NABO, right?
All the
There's a lot of
acronyms.
acronyms we got
Yeah.
really
Mhm.
comfortable with. And as a way of, for organizations that are about inclusion, that kind of stuff does exclude you, as opposed to Shaquante said economic impact and you said job growth. And those are things that people can understand. So
Mhm.
I think that's absolutely true. And I think the impact piece of it is going to be important too. People understand impact on their local community. Um,
Mhm.
Awesome.
Then, I'm sorry, and I did want to add, I think it's funny because all along we've been doing this and
Right.
we have been focusing on these things.
Right.
It's just that people, when you use certain words, then people kind of turn the ear, the hearing off.
Yeah.
But when you
Yeah.
use these words, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I can get along with that. Well, you would have been along with it before. You just didn't like the language that I was using. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah,
Well,
I've had my business for a long time, and I remember, and I've been a woman and woman-owned business for a long time, and I remember distinctly, I think going to an office in Cleveland, and I think all I had to do at that time was show my business card, and I was a woman-owned business.
mm,
And I was a small business. And so that terminology, being a woman-owned business, was there back then. Would I have had to, it was before, HR 50/50. So would I have had to get a cosigner for a loan? Yes, I would have, and all those things. But I was still a small business. I was still a
right.
woman-owned business. It was just different.
Hmm.
So this is going to feel a little bit like we're going backwards, but I want to ask this question, starting with you, Liz, to answer it, because I believe it came out of the session that was done at NAWBO Days in DC in June. And that is it really as terrible as it sounds when it comes to opportunities for diverse businesses with corporations?
so it's a great question. And we just went through the fears. So are there very real fears? Like Shaquante said, people are getting laid off. Yeah, that's terrible. So there are terrible things happening. And I think just like we said about the language of, to bring it down to small and local, I think you have to look at it opportunity by opportunity, company by company, not just the narrative that we heard, especially at the beginning. I think it was really scary at first when you heard big companies that had very good supplier inclusion and development programs pulling back. Like, we're not going to do this, we're not going to count it anymore. And it just seemed like every day there were new people, new organizations, new companies coming out and saying they weren't going to do that. So that was scary. Um, and destabilizing. But then as I talked to individual people and places, some of those companies that had very public rollbacks, the people I talked to in supplier inclusion were like, I got a promotion. I have 6 people working under me. Um, we call it something different, to Shaquante's point again, like we call it something else, but we're still doing it. Are there terrible things out there? Absolutely. Is everything everywhere all at once terrible? Not necessarily. And there are still some places, some opportunities for standing out, for distinguishing yourself. And again, NABO is an organization that can help you see, okay, someone showing up to a NABO event, they care. You know, someone's sponsoring, someone's willing to, table here. That means they care, their organization cares. There's still resources behind it.
Hmm. I don't know if any of you know the statistics, but I was in a room not long ago with it was a WeBank. One of the panelists was a WeBank RPO person, regional partner organization. To your point about they wouldn't know what we're talking about,
The secret language.
and she made the comment that of the 100 and some companies that partner with them, most of them were doubling down, and they had only two that basically kind of walked away. Two out of 180, I think it was some big number. I don't know if any of you guys know the statistics, but I think it's important for people to hear that what you just said, Liz, which is many have grown their functions, doubled down. They're still doing the same work. And Shaquante, maybe we should come to you on this also. They're still doing the work. It's just called something else. And she also made the comment that we didn't always have, as all of you have said, we didn't always have the initials. We didn't have the initials. We were still doing the work. We've been doing it forever. Anybody want to comment on any of that?
I'm going to jump in before Shaquante does, because I mean she is in the trenches of this, but I can say, and this is maybe to compliment her a little bit as well while I'm making my point. People like Shaquante have always been creating opportunities for resilient supply chains. And the label
Say that one more time.
creating resilient supply chains. What she does on a daily basis is to make sure that the oxygen that makes the engine run is available so that the engine can run efficiently and effectively. And that means going out and developing new suppliers, creating opportunities for suppliers who might not otherwise have a chance to actually show up and maybe represent added value for her employer and so on and so forth. It happened to be called supplier diversity at one point in time, but it was actually simply part of the risk, compliance, and resilience organization at her company. And there are lots of people like her who we fundamentally just pigeonholed them because of the label and because it had an emotional tone to it where you say, I want to do right by minorities or women or veterans. But what they're really doing is they're serving a corporate purpose. And I use the oxygen analogy because one of our clients who faced with, the difficult decision of what do we do now that this has become a topic of conversation, they said, this is literally like asking me, should I reduce the oxygen level in the room? It's like, that you need 20% oxygen to function. And so what I'm not about to do is to reduce it to 10% and expect a better result. That just doesn't make any sense. And so they saw an inclusive and resilient supply chain as an essential part of them being able to be successful and to return value to their shareholders. It wasn't actually a nice thing to do. It was like, we have to have this, otherwise we can't exist and we cannot survive. And people like Shaquanta have been doing it unsung, unappreciated forever. And now it's come into the spotlight and now we're talking about it, but they've been doing this the whole time.
What a great analogy. And so now let's go to our oxygen giver. Okay.
Well, I think okay. Is it as bad as it sounds? I don't think so. Initially, it was like doom and gloom, when these things first started happening. But as you really sit down, ask questions, pay attention, see what's going on, it's not as terrible. But I will say this, how Ade mentioned equity specifically, or at least, getting companies ready. I focus on equity. So I will say, did our program name change? I changed it because I saw the writing on the wall, or at least I thought I did. And so last year I made the change before any of this was really happening because you kind of tell it was on the way. But I was like, my main focus is equity. I just want the companies that are interested in doing business with Volkswagen, to be prepared. We don't do business the same way as the other OEMs. We don't have the same requirements, and we have our own set of acronyms here, and we just spout them off and think people know them, and they don't. And so my main focus has been, I'm trying to get these companies to a place where they can compete with these companies.
Right.
That is all I want to do. I want to make sure that when they walk in the room, that they can answer the questions, they know the acronyms or whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
because they need to know that so that people take them serious. I was a buyer here for too long. I know what people think when you walk in the room and you don't know something and we're like, oh, this guy. You know what I mean? Like, I want to avoid that. And so that's where my focus has been, to make sure that we have an equitable situation so that our supply chain, can persist. We don't want monopolies and things like that.
So let's go to, and I'm going to stay with you, Shaquante, about this, because there are people that may not even know this terminology, but talk about the concept and value of impact sourcing.
Impact sourcing. Let me say, okay, so I don't know. I think when I think about impact sourcing, I think about economic impact, just like we spoke about before. I mean, when you're in a situation where you're buying, when there's a need, you need to buy something, it's basic business. And so when you are a business and operating, dollars and cents, there's going to be some impact somewhere. It's just about where do you want it? A lot of times I try to say, okay, let's try to find some US vendors versus, I don't know, some companies out of Europe or whatever the case, because I want to see what the impact might be if we found somebody around this area, so if I wanted to look at it that way, then that's what I would consider impact sourcing. Do I want to see people in my community do a certain thing? Like, Volkswagen is a pretty big deal here in Chattanooga. And so, if we bring in some of the companies that maybe the Urban League is recommending, then, I can see what that impact looks like or how I can support. And if I can't, then maybe I can put them in position to work with somebody else's, area of impact.
Awesome. Liz?
Yeah, and I would just add too, this time, the environment, we're talking about a very specific piece of it, supplier inclusion, risk and compliance. But I'm talking to my friends every day, like, is it climate change? Like, why do I feel this way? Is it climate change? Is it personal? Is it a midlife crisis? Is it, like, what is it? But I think there's a lot of stuff to have an impact on. I think some sustainability or ESG markings are also really important. Like, are you reducing your carbon emissions, as opposed to just, okay, this is the 51% owner of a company. Are you paying your workers a living wage? Or is all of this transparent? Where is as Shaquante said, dollars and cents getting spent equals impact. Is that impact positive or negative for you as a supplier? And I think, I don't know if this is where we talk about whether what we had before was really working to begin with. But it's an opportunity, like, fear's not bad, as Ade said. It's an opportunity to look at, was everything we were doing before, was that actually counting what we wanted it to count?
Right.
Were we making the impact we thought we were making? So I think that's important too.
Well, and we think about, when we talk about fear, think about the mindset when lockdown first got announced, in 2020. Were we fearful? And did we all have
Terrified.
to pivot? And was there opportunity? Of course there was. On the other side of fear, there's always opportunity. And so from a mindset perspective, I'm curious what we could say to the, we're here on behalf of NAWBO for the women business owners out there. What are some things that we can do to get to the other side of that mindset of fear? So I'm curious what your answer to that is, and we can start with anyone, but how do you get past that? How do you change your mindset? What can women business owners do to be more prepared and to change their mindset?
Oh,
Boy.
I think
I can
Ade wants to talk. I think
can
Ade
take a
wants to
crack at
talk.
it.
Yeah.
I can take a crack at this. I mean, first of all, and I was going to make this point a little bit earlier, and you were describing walking into that office building in Cleveland. Besides the fact that you're a woman and you own a business, you're a business owner at the end of the day.
Bingo.
And so a lot has been made of what kind of business owner am I? But that really spoke more to what obstacles do I have to overcome as a business owner, as opposed to, and it somehow morphed, I think, at a certain point into, well, this is a particular type of business owner. It's a woman business owner versus a veteran business owner versus a minority business owner. But in actuality, you're a business owner first, and then you had to, knock down a bunch of walls because the fact that you're a woman became an issue for some, and so on and so forth. So we're talking about what can businesses do to overcome the fear? The first thing is to remember you're a business owner, first of all, and then think about, okay, I want to compete on my merits, because that's basically the charter now, right? We are in a completely inclusive society, et cetera, by fiat. Okay, so merit is actually what we're talking about. I can get the job done. I have the capability. I'm ready. I'm reliable. I'm able. I'm prepared. And so merit is what we are supposed to be aiming for. We're trying to get to a meritocracy, which actually, now that I think about it, is what everybody was fighting for in the first place, which was, hey, I just want to be able to succeed on my own merit. So
Right.
I think if we can focus on that, and if I don't want to use the acronym. Here's the thing. I promise not to use an acronym for the rest of the week. If the women business owners, the women business enterprises that are listening to this, or any other business enterprise that's listening to this, because I think NABO has an influence over businesses in general. But if you think about the merit of your capability, the merit of your ability to compete, your readiness, what you represent to your prospective customer. And if that is where you put 100% of your energy, Janet, you're going to be a woman at the end of the day, regardless of what the rules say, what the issues say, what the challenges are. And you're going to be a business owner, and you're going to be a business owner that's trying to compete, as is Liz. And when Shaquante looks at a woman-owned business, she's looking for a business first. I know this because we had a conversation about Volkswagen's process by which they evaluate and assess businesses. And I can guarantee you, they don't say, hey, you know what, their quality is kind of poor, but they're woman-owned business, so we'll overlook that right now. That's not anywhere in that book or in that training. So I think there is an opportunity here. It does require a little bit of steely resolve, as it were, to get through the uncertainty, the fear, the reality of people losing jobs. But people lose jobs when there are pandemics out. So that had nothing to do with race or gender. I think it's just, if there's any group of people that are suited to get through this, I think it's these very, very serious women business enterprises that I run into at conferences, events, meetings, online, in calls, because women-owned businesses have already had to run through a field of broken glass to get here. So this is nothing. This is just, okay, we're going to compete on merit now, which I think, as I said, everybody's wanted to compete on merit forever. And now if that's the law of the land, then so be it. That's kind of how I see it.
We need to also have you add to your serious fun. With NABO, we have a lot of fun also, but you've said serious many times so far.
I use
And we
I
are
use
serious.
serious because I've never met a more focused group of people. I mean, you have fun while you're being serious, but
That's very true.
my mother was a woman-owned business owner, and she had to keep her business running, deal with the discrimination that came with being a woman in a male-dominated world, and still be successful. And she managed to do all of those things. All I saw was it was my mom, and she was always focused and always thinking and always trying to figure stuff out. It's only as an adult that I realized that she was being a business owner in very adverse conditions. And I've taken that as a big internal driver for myself, to say, yeah, doing business is hard. And for some people, it's even harder than for others, but they
Yeah.
succeed in spite of all of that. And that's all that really ever matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shaquante, what would you like to say about how can women business owners be more prepared and shift that mindset?
I mean, I feel like Ade answered the question totally. I don't even know how I can follow him. I was just thinking, in my opinion, the merit has always been there. I think that now just being a woman is like a cherry on the top. You know what I mean? Like imagine watching a football game and you don't know it, but there's a girl running all the good plays. You know what I mean? You don't know it until they show it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just think that women have the ability to always survive and they're going to figure it out either way. We always figure it out. That's just the way it is. But yeah, I feel like they answered it. I mean, the merit has always been what we were looking for, is what's been happening. I don't think anybody has been surviving on any of these contracts just because they were put into a box. They were doing it because they could do it, you know?
Any additions, Liz?
I would just say, yeah, if that was your fear, if your fear was you were going to get NAVO certified and then you weren't going to get a million contracts right off the bat to your inbox, don't worry about it because that was never going to happen anyway. That's nothing to
Exactly.
do
Right.
with where we are right now. That's not the way it ever worked. So I would say that, and then also too, there's a macro situation, but really evaluate your opportunities. Look into your opportunities. Are these companies, supporting you? Are there opportunities there? Because I think you can paint with broad strokes and feel like it is doom and gloom. But when you talk to people and build those relationships, which is how it gets done anyway, you'll find that there's still opportunities out there.
Definitely.
So I have a question for all of you, and that question is, what's a question that we should be answering here that we haven't yet, if anything?
I don't know. I think for me is what can you do to make yourself seen? Because sometimes that's
Mm,
the first step. There are so many companies, and I can just speak from experience, that just reach out and they're like, hey, I do A, B, and C. Well, lots of people do A, B, and C. What is it that you do or that I can say to somebody on the, I don't know, investment team that's going to make them want to listen to you? So you have to figure out like what's your thing? How am I going to see you so that I can get you seen? By the people who make the decisions.
Absolutely.
awesome.
I have a question, but it's a plug. It's a shameless plug, but actually it has its underpinnings in fact and reality. Are you onboarding ready? And that's a concept that we promote. But as a company, I remember when we wanted to do work with certain types of organizations, and we got some advice from somebody who says, "Well, you're going to need to be ISO certified." I thought, man, ISO certification, all right. And that was a great expense and a lot of pain, and we became ISO certified. And then we got another piece of advice that says, well, you need to be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant because of the nature of your business. And that's even more painful.
Right.
And nobody, by the way, is going to pay you up front and say, I want you to go do all of these things. Here's some money. You have to invest in yourself to be ready for the opportunity that you hope and pray and try to make sure occurs. But that's the investment. So as to the question, are you ready in general, or are you onboarding ready? Have you done an assessment of the business you're in, a clear-eyed evaluation of what you look like relative to the people you're competing against? If the people you're competing against, in our case, if they were ISO certified and SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, we could rest assured that we would never be able to catch up with them or beat them on a regular, consistent basis. So we had to get ready for the market that we were in. And sometimes that means looking at yourself in a way that reveals weaknesses, areas that you are not quite competitive, and then you have some decisions to make to say, am I deluding myself to think that I'm going to be successful at this because I'm not ready in these ways, and so on and so forth. And then when the Shaquantes of the world come calling and they say, I think there's an opportunity for you, but you're going to have to jump through a bunch of hoops because everybody does. Are you going to be ready to jump through those hoops? Do you know that the hoops exist? Do you know what they are? Have you invested and taken whatever training that lets you know what the hoops are and how to get through them? And I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but it's the number one thing that we see that companies aren't totally honest with themselves, where they say they believe they're ready, they emotionally feel like they're ready, but there's nothing like an auditor to come in and tell you you're not ready.
Mhm. Or somebody like me, because
Or somebody
I'll
like
I'll be honest, and I don't know if this is gonna stay, but like you mentioned, emotional. I think a lot of people are emotionally tied to the things that they've done so far, and when you tell them that something's missing, it's
Mhm.
like, well, I already did all of these things. Can't you just take it like this? No, I can't.
No.
I'm not telling you that you need a website because it's going to make me happy. I'm telling you because nobody's going to be interested if they go looking for you to try to find out about your company and you don't have a website or
Yeah.
you don't have a domain and you're still using Gmail. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you. You know what I mean? So people have to be open to the critique, or at least I don't even think that's a critique. It's more so these are the requirements and these are things that I'm
Correct.
trying to tell you to help you.
Yeah.
That's correct. I know that when people fill out their information for NABO certification, they think it's a lot, and there is nothing that is asked that a business owner shouldn't already have
Right.
readily available to them to put. It should take an hour, to pull things together to put it in there. And so I'm amazed at the people that we talk to where you got to kind of coach them through. They're not asking you for anything that you shouldn't readily have available.
Mhm.
And
Liz,
take
it
an
looked like you were
opportunity.
going to say something, Liz.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, that's okay. I was just going to say, in terms of the questions we should ask, I think the other question, just going back to what I said at the beginning, which is, how are we going to get this information? Things are constantly changing. Things are, they're evolving. Maybe they're getting better, but how are you going to have this information? And that's why community is important. Having a community, being certified, you're going to be at the front lines of getting the information that NABO has, that these organizations have going forward. So that's what I want to say.
Mhm.
Awesome.
As we bring this to a wrap, what is one comment, piece of advice, other than what we have already given, which is a lot, that each of you would like to make? Ade, I'm going to start with you.
It's to maybe go back to the theme from before. I think you have to look at readiness as a competitive edge. As my mother used to say, when your ship comes in, will you be standing at the airport? It's like, don't be in the wrong place, don't be unprepared. You know, you we all know that we are ready for great things, but are we really? And so I think if you look at readiness as actually how you differentiate from everyone else, you have everything else. You know how to have fun, you're resilient, you're gritty, you can be serious when you need to be, but are you actually ready? Because when the opportunity comes, you have to seize it. And I think that's just an important thing for any business.
Awesome. Thank you. Liz?
I would just say maximize the tools that are available to you. We've talked a lot about use the certification to do business, but there's a lot that the certification offers: education, the readiness that Ade is talking about, mindset, and other business owners who are either going through what you're going through or have done it already. So really take advantage of that. Don't just have a laser focus on sales, sales, sales. I just got to sell. There's a lot available.
Awesome. Shaquante?
Um, I think I would probably just say when you're trying to get yourself in a position to do business with a new company, make sure that, like we already talked about readiness, but make sure that you have your ducks in a row. Know what you want to talk to that person about, already know something about the company, maybe where they have some need, or maybe, you've done a little research and you know where you can get yourself in the door. Maybe you want to be a tier two. Just know how you want to come in so that somebody like me can say, okay, well, maybe I can do A, B, and C to support you. Because that's what the function is, it's support. And so if I know where you want to begin, then it's a little easier.
Thank you all. I think this is so beneficial, what we are doing. as we were talking about various topics and various questions, I could see a part two in the works. I could. You just mentioned tier two. We didn't even talk about it. And yes, there's other things that NAWBO is doing so that people get acclimated to that, but I could easily see, an ongoing dialogue here. So thank you all very, very much. It's been awesome to be with you, and I can't wait to see you at another NAWBO event.